Um, First of all, let me explain a little bit why I chose this topic. Most people would think, Node.js has nothing to do with PHP. I personally like testing new platforms, new languages, every time that I get a chance. When I first hit Node.js, I got really interested with it, and I think, everyone who has a little bit of interest in exploring different technologies is going to find the same thing. Also, I'm gonna make a clarification. The other day I was watching a PHP conference, and this woman was talking about some topic which I can't remember, but she kept saying the word awesome over and over, like everything is awesome, awesome, and it really bothered me. So if every time I get to say the word awesome, and you go like this and grab my attention, you get a free beer. So I'm gonna try to seriously avoid not saying awesome, and this doesn't count. Yeah. Okay, so a little bit about me first. I'm from Argentina. I used to live in a big city, and then I moved to a little bit of a quiet neighborhood, like 20,000 people. I live by the beach, but it's not as cool as it sounds because the water is kind of cold, so you don't get to surf or anything unless you want to be, freeze to death. I've been a CakePHP developer since 2006, and I know that's why I got the badge old-timer, because I am. Since then, pretty much every project that I work with, it's been using CakePHP. All my clients use CakePHP. And you probably heard that I also, switched to Lithium. It's not that bad. It's not that bad as it sounds. It's just two different technologies, and I'm perfectly comfortable working with both of them. I worked in countless projects, in countless CakePHP projects. I'm currently working for English 360, which is a learning platform built entirely on CakePHP. It's kind of cool. And if you're looking for work, just contact me because I have a bunch of clients who ask me to come to the conference and look for people, for talented people. So there. I'm a big open source supporter. I work in a lot of different open source projects that range from from any language to any language: C++, Python, PHP, so JavaScript, Node.js. So I spend every little bit of time that I have besides work doing open source work. So, yeah. I had a recently published CakePHP 1.3 book. I've heard that it's not that bad. So, if you have any complaints, please. Yeah, I have one recommendation regarding my book. Don't buy the Kindle version. I heard that it sucked. So, I have nothing to do with it, but, I heard that it's really bad. And I survived a knockout. This was a competition that happened the last weekend. It was 48 hours coding in Node.js, building anything that you want, but it has to use Node.js. And I built something. I'm going to talk a little bit, just for 2 seconds, a little bit after this talk. So yeah, what are we going to talk about Node.js when it has nothing to do with CakePHP? So if there's something that I really most people wouldn't know this, but if there is something that I would really want to teach you, is that you shouldn't just stick to a technology because you know the technology. You should try to explore different things to solve different problems. For example, in the applications that I work in, we're using CakePHP, Python for shell scripts or automated shell scripting tools. We use Node.js to speed up different JSON elements or Ajax operations. We use C++ to build modules for Node.js, and we use, engines for, it just makes sense. If you don't know about engines, you should probably find out about it because, it's going to save your life. So, yes, it's not CakePHP, but at the same time, it can really leverage your application. And what we are going to talk about today is actually we're going to start learning about Node.js, and the second half of the talk is going to be about taking a CakePHP application and taking part of that application and convert it to Node.js to actually leverage the performance. So you're going to see how well Node.js can play with CakePHP or any other PHP framework for that matter. And it's very common in the Node.js world to actually say that Node.js is something to be used with, it can be used with other tools, it can be used as a standalone tool to build your website, but it's best used as what it does best, which is what we are going to learn during this talk. So in order to understand why we're looking at Node.js, we need to understand what's the problem that we're trying to solve. Because at the beginning of the talk, I said that there are different solutions to different problems. The first question that comes to mind is, what is an application normally doing? When you're any web application, what is it normally doing? It's waiting for resources. You open a file and you're waiting for the file to be ready to be read. You query a database and you're waiting for the results to be ready for your application. You write to a file and you're waiting for the operation to complete. You encode a video and you're waiting for the encoding to be done. So that's precious time that makes you wonder if we are actually suffering performance hit in our application because of that waiting time. So that's what an application is normally doing. So what can I do to improve my application speed normally? The first thing that comes to mind in any application is file caching. In CakePHP, you can do file caching, use memcache, anything that that can help you bring down the response time. Actually, yeah, bring down the response time and handle more requests per second. And you can get away with a lot of improvements using caching, but it's going to take you up to a point. Sometimes you may think that caching a database query into file caching, for example, is going to improve the speed, and sometimes it doesn't. So you have to watch out where you add caching and how it's improving your application. You can start adding workers. Workers, I think Mark is having a talk on RabbitMQ, is that correct? Yeah, workers, starting to take parts of the application that don't require user interaction away from the actual user experience, like sending an email. Like when you're completing a form and as a result of that form, an email is sent, it's stupid to have the user waiting for the email to be sent. You just trigger an event in your application and you have some sort of separate process handling the actual email sending. So that's also going to help you improve different parts of your application, but we still need to go a little bit further. So the next thing that you wonder, okay, how can I improve the speed of my database? Sometimes you can get a lot done by optimizing whatever database you use, relational database, but sometimes it helps to actually consider non-relational databases. We're talking about document-oriented databases, something like Couch or MongoDB. That's why it's no surprise that we have actually 2 talks in this conference about MongoDB, because it can really help improve your application speed. The next thing that comes to mind is vertical scale, adding more resources, adding more RAM, better hard drive, better processor to your server. And it's still because a lot of times you see the argument of, just throw hardware at your problem, and yeah, it can get you it can really improve the speed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're solving the total problem that you're having. You can horizontal scale, just add more servers to your setup. That's also going to help you get a long way, moving from 1 MySQL to 5 slave MySQLs, you're going to improve a lot of speed. But still, you can get to those numbers that are really surprising when you see benchmarks on the newest tools, which is the 10,000 concurrent, 20,000 concurrent users actually hitting your system. So how do you get there? In order to understand how we get there, this is a graphic that I think is pretty much on every single Node.js presentation, and for a good reason. It presents a difference between Nginx and Apache. Can everyone see that? Otherwise, I zoom. I think it's readable, right? In 2 terms, concurrent connections and memory usage. The more concurrent connections that you have, the less Apache is able to handle simultaneous users. And the more concurrent connections that you have, Apache is starting to eat memory like if it was Firefox or something. It's eating memory and memory and memory. But Nginx stays the same. Why? Because Apache is working with threads. That's operating system threads. And every time that you launch a thread, there's a bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes that requires a lot of memory, and that brings the system down to a point where it's clogged. Nginx, on the other side, is event-based, which means that whenever an event happens, something happens on Nginx, and there are no threads going on. So the memory usage is very low, and it almost stays constant through time, regardless of the number of connections. Threads, on the other hand, spend a lot of time being blocked, by waiting for different processes in the operating system to be done. So there's a lot of time that we're just waiting. Events are best served or are more useful when more time is waiting on external resources. And as we said, pretty much every web application is waiting on external resources, be it database, queries, file writing and reading and stuff. So this is where pretty much Node comes in. And the first thing that people ask is like, okay, what the hell is Node.js? In order to really summarize, it's JavaScript on the server side. The first time that I read that description, it was like, that doesn't make any sense. What do you mean JavaScript on the server side? What am I going to use JavaScript for? But when you start dissecting Node.js, it starts to make sense. The first thing that makes sense is that it uses VH. That's the Google engine. Why does it make sense? Because it's Google. And Google is spending all tons of money to improve it, and just Ryan Dahl, which is the creator of Node.js, is sitting just waiting for the updates to come and improving Node.js because of the improvements in V8. It's important to know that it's V8 without the DOM elements. So anything that has to do with DOM processing, like with browser element processing, is not part of the V8 that is being used in Node.js. That may seem like, okay, this is so what do I care? If it's server side, why would I need the DOM? That's very important when you're considering running the same JavaScript code in the server and the client. For example, when you're doing game engines, when you're executing game engines with Node.js, you have to realize that. So you can't use an engine that depends on the DOM model, because it's going to work on the client, but it's not going to work on the server. So it's V8 on one side, and it's evented.io on the other side. And evented.io is, every time that you hear about Node.js, you're going to see the word evented throw. Like if you're doing something wrong, people are going to say you're not doing evented code. You're not doing it right. You're doing it wrong. So evented is the core of Node.js, and it is one of the things that we're going to learn in this talk. So what was the reasoning behind choosing V8? In V8, like we said, performance is everything. So Google is throwing money because they're in a competition with other engines, JavaScript engines, to become the best. So how do they achieve high performance? The first thing that they do is property access through hidden classes. If you work with JavaScript, you know that you can add properties to an object, to a function at runtime, and you can modify the way an object is built at runtime. Which sounds great from the developer perspective, but it's a real performance hit, because if you have to keep track of the properties that you're adding to an object, what are you thinking? Some sort of dictionary. A dictionary that says this object has this set of properties that contain these values, and the moment that I add a new property, it gets added to the dictionary. So if I need to access a property, I need to look through the dictionary. So that's not good. What Google did is it creates a snapshot of every object at one point in time. So the moment that you add a new property to an object, it creates another object, which is a different from the previous object. So it can immediately go to an actual memory address the moment that you request a property in JavaScript, a property that you may have added. So that actually is speeding up the memory access, because otherwise they will have to go through a dictionary. The next thing that they did to improve speed is compilation, which comes to mind every time that you're thinking about script languages. Compile the code. But in this case, they are not using the typical, intermediate format machine code. They're actually compiling it to machine code, to assembler. So the first time that the V8 engine is parsing a JavaScript, it compiles it to machine. So the next time that it needs, it's right there, compiled, and that's fast. The next thing, obviously, is garbage collection, but not the fact that it has garbage collection, because every JavaScript engine has to have garbage collection, but the fact that since every time that the engine is collecting garbage, you're losing precious time. So and it actually hands the system. So when a Node.js process is going through the V8 garbage collection process, it hands your system. So in order for that to affect less your application, what they did is every time that they need to process, they only process part of the heap. They don't go through the entire heap and looking to free the memory that is no longer used. They just do parts, chunks of it, every time that they need to do. So that helps a little bit. But even then, that's one of the weakest points of any engine. Anything that involves garbage collection is actually one of the weakest points, because you can optimize it up to a point. So that's one of the downsides of having automatic memory management. I come from the C++ world, so every time that I work in a language that has garbage collection, you can appreciate it from the developer perspective, but performance-wise, you get a hit. But at least it works. So what does that bring us? Like every time that Google does an update, you get constant improvements. You're going to see here how throughout time and throughout the different versions, V8 is improving like crazy. So that's another great reason to keep using V8 as the engine. So when we said we had invented I/O, we need to understand a little bit how that's composed inside Node. This is not necessarily something that you're gonna have to deal with when you work with Node. You don't necessarily have to know about libaio and libev, but it's very important to understand the recent changes that have been going on in the Node.js arena in the last few weeks. And in order to understand that, you need to understand a little bit of the different parts. libaio is basically a library made by Mark Lehman that handles, uses POSIX threads to keep polling mode on different events. So with libaio, every time that you open a file, there's an event going on. So that's the C++ side of Node.js to give you non-blocking I/O. libev is also was also developed by Mark Lehman, and it's the event part, the actual event processing. Once an action happens, what do I need to do? And libaio uses libev as its event backbone, but it can use something else if they want to. libub is something that, and that's the reason why I said that you need to know this, because it's changing the whole Node.js arena. Recently, Ryan got contacted by Microsoft to make sure that Node.js runs on Windows. And in order for that to happen, he had to actually, kind of rewrite most of the code, because it was purely Linux code, for handling events and threads and everything. So he had to create a new wrapper around the different libraries for different operating systems to make sure that Node.js works on Windows. And it may sound weird when you think, okay, why on Windows? Well, I don't know, because people still run server with Windows for some reason. So he said, okay, we need to support that. We need to make sure that works. And libub is his attempt, which is pretty successful so far, to do the evented I/O and the evented system on Windows using IOCP, which is a Windows technology. And this code a little. Can you read that code? I'm asking. Okay, great. This is what most of Node.js code looks like. You're going to see callbacks, closures inside of closures, inside of closures, inside of closures. Why? Because again, what we are doing here is doing something, and when that something is ready to be processed, it's executing a function in my code. So, for example, to dissect a little bit how these two libraries are part of Node.js, this little function. Oh man. Okay. This little function right here is part of Node.js core library file system. Read file is a bunch of JavaScript code on top of C++ code, and that C++ code uses libaio to actually do the input-output operation. So from the JavaScript side, you don't need to know that, but it helps to understand what's going on behind the scenes. So every time that you're using a function, one of these two libraries is being used at one point or another. But in the future, everything is moving towards using libub, everything inside the code. This is important when you consider writing modules for Node.js using C++ or any other, C++, that's the only thing that you can use. It's very important because it changes the game. So from 0.55, which is going to be using that library per default, every module out there is going to be updated. That's including one of my different modules. So that's how Node.js is, and you have to understand that it's not something that is stable, and the API doesn't change, and you can use the same stuff for years, and it's constantly evolving, which is also part of the appeal for me. And this is a tweet that actually was last week, and it's very surprising to see how how Windows can keep up pretty much almost to the same performance levels than Linux using that library UV. So that's pretty good. And they release it as a node.exe, a node executable that you can run on your Windows server. And there are people already using it, but it's still completely in development mode. So don't expect, if you're on Windows or you want to use Node on Windows, don't expect any sort of stability by now, for now, because you're not gonna get it. So what other parts besides those two main libraries are out there that are part of Node that help my application? Buffer is actually something very interesting to consider because we're going to go through a little bit about it, but everything you know is in one process. So that means that the heap of the process is very important to your application because it's a limited heap. The amount of memory that you can allocate within the same process. I think it's 1.5 gigabytes. So that means that when you have to handle large amounts of data, large amounts of text or binary code or whatever, it's very, very important that you don't use the heap, that you somehow take that data away from the heap and do what you need to do, and then get it on the heap when you want to do that. And buffer is exactly that. It's a class in Node.js that you're going to see very often when you see Node.js code that is used to handle large portions of data and convert it, to binary or UTF-8 or whatever to bring it to the Node heap. Another part is, and this is quite useful if you're dealing with networking applications, CRs, is the DNS, the asynchronous DNS query. So whenever you need to resolve a hostname or whatever, if you've used Linux or anything, that that's one of the most painful and time-taking processes for some reason that Linux has. So it's very important that you do it asynchronously and you don't hang your application because of it. You have child process about forking processes, just spawning new processes. This is very important when you, and we're going to see a little bit about it, very important when you consider, not doing everything in a single node process. And recently, the fork method was added, which allows not only to create another process in Node, but to allow to communicate different processes using a common JSON mechanism, which is awesome because it lets you, have different processes. And yeah. Oh, fuck. I'm going to write it down because I'm going to forget. I was really sure that I wasn't going to say one. Damn it. Okay. At least you were listening. So it's great. It can communicate. It can help you have your process communicating with each other using JSON. Crypto, well, you know what that is. It's just doing regular SSL encryption, hashing keys, and everything. Again, why are we mentioning this? Because it's asynchronous. It doesn't stop. It doesn't block your application. So while the system is creating your hash, you can continue doing other stuff. HTTP parser, if you're like me and you like C or C++ code, it's an impressive piece of code that Ryan wrote, where he built an actual HTTP parser without using any sort of memory. And you have to read the code to be blown away, because I'm really impressed. I don't know how he did it. And I keep reading the code and it makes sense, but I wouldn't have able to pull that off. Timer, obviously, to help us with say timeout and sort interval. Everyone is familiar with JavaScript, right? Because I'm going to assume that during the talk. I just realized I didn't ask, so I'm assuming that everyone knows JavaScript. So those are two tools that you have in regular JavaScript that are brought to know through that module. So okay, that means that I pretty much can build anything that comes to mind. So should I throw away my CakePHP application? Again, the point is not thinking in exclusive terms. Just think of how this concept of asynchronous, not blocking, can help your application improve its speed. So what does Node.js look like? The first thing that we need to realize is that when you're working with Node.js, you're again doing server-side JavaScript, which means there's no web server. It's not like PHP where you have a web server that spawns the PHP process and executes your application. In this case, in Node.js, you have to write the web server. So don't worry, because there are a lot of tools out there to help you do that. Which means that the regular hello world in Node.js doesn't look any. Okay, so it's working now? Yeah. Great, okay. So, yeah, since Node is a single thread, it's a single process, that's a single thread, that means that if you block that thread, you're going to block the entire application. But don't worry, that only happens if you decide to do so. Like right here, I'm just, in the middle of whenever I process the incoming server request, I'm doing, a simple while to block for 5 seconds, and that blocks the entire application. So that means that the server listening in this port is not going to be able to process new requests until that's done. Which means that it's very important that whatever you do, you keep it non-blocking. So if you use any Node module that deals with files, with databases, and whatever, it's going to be non-blocking. So you don't have to worry about that. You just have to make sure that if you write code, just keep it non-blocking. And that is one of the phrases you're going to see the most if you hang around the Node.js, IRC, and Google Group. Everyone's saying constantly, keep it non-blocking, just keep it non-blocking. You should get a t-shirt saying keep it non-blocking. Because those operations where they stay non-blocking, input-output operations, are at the point where Node switches between requests. So at the point where when something non-blocking is going on, it's ready to be handling a new request. So the more you keep it non-blocking, the more processes, the more incoming requests you can handle. So since Node is a single process, if you know a little bit about operating system, that means that it's tied to a core, which sounds like it can get in the way of actual real performance improvement. Because since Node is tied to a core, what happens if I have a 4 or 8 core hardware in my system, not utilizing it to its best? You have, in order for you to solve that problem, you have different approaches. Most people tend to use either one of these two. The first one is using some sort of reverse proxy in the front of your Node application that would trigger the incoming request to different ports, to different Node instances. And since you can use different Linux tools to stick a Node process to a certain CPU, you can tell your Linux or your whatever operating system you have. I wonder how that's going to be possible in Windows, no? But you can tell it to tie this Node process to the first CPU, the second process to the second CPU, and so forth. And Nginx or Varnish or HA proxy or whatever you want to put in front is going to be, balancing the request through those processes. The second is letting the actual operating system handle that, which means creating processes and letting the operating system divide it across the different CPUs that you have. We're going to see a little bit about that. There's also, I think I have a bonus track on this little tool, which is a lifesaver. Whenever you get involved in Node, you're going to see that you have countless modules, but the best modules always come from the same quality people. One of those people or companies called LearnBoost, and they develop like most of the stuff that people that have been using Node for a while, they tend to use at least one product, and Cluster is one of their products. Well, their modules, of course, is open source, and it can save your life because it handles the same concept but automatically. So it launches as many processes as you have CPUs, or you can change the number, and it does everything automatically. So you just wrap it in that model, and it's going to be, well, again, we're going to cover that if we have time in the bonus tracks. Since we've been discussing there are a lot of modules, how do you handle, getting the modules into your application? Node has a great package manager called npm, where you can use it, in your console. You simply install it, you start using it by installing packages into your application. There are two ways to install packages: locally and globally. If you install locally, it's part of the actual application directory. So for example, if you push to GitHub your entire application, the Node modules directory is going to be right there. And if you install globally, of course, it's going to be available for every Node.js application that you have. This number is actually old, and it's like, I think, 3 weeks old. It's constantly new modules are being uploaded and upgraded into the registry, which is impressive to look at, considering that how new Node.js is. So there's people everywhere in the world producing packages after packages after packages. This is one of my modules we're going to discuss a little bit later. So in order for the whole repository / package system to work, you need a sort of way to include those packages inside your Node.js application. That is part of one of the specifications that the common JS specification has, which is an attempt to bring some sort of sanity to the JavaScript world, by saying, okay, we should do things, kind of the same way. One of those things that they say is how to deal with modules inside JavaScript. It's not like PHP where you have include or anything, so it's a little bit different. You require a module which translates to a file system file, which in this case would be module.js in the current directory, and whatever that module exports is ready in my application, which is actually quite powerful. I think you were discussing, Mark, yesterday about the Python module system. I find this a little bit more interesting because you get to say what is exported. You can export a list of functions, you can export an object, you can export an actual function. So if you would have exported an actual function, M would be a function that you can use. So whatever you put in the exports object is going to be exported whenever someone requires you. And if you want to, like I said, if you want to export a whole function, you would, instead of using exports equals, you would have to do module.exports equal. It's the only thing that is kind of funny and may confuse people. But you create your JavaScript file, you create your set of functions, and you add them to exports object, and they are ready to be used in any Node application. And publishing that to the npm package is really simple. You just need to create a package that JSON file that has a certain format. You can browse that around the internet, and it works. And it also helps you if you create a package.json in your main directory, defining which modules in a JSON format, which modules you're using, which version of those modules you require. I'm gonna show you that because that's actually kind of cool to look at. So
those modules hashed, was it weekend each time?
Yeah. It's every time that you require a module is cached. So the first time that you require it is processed. The second time is used in production. So you can sort of like require once in PHP. You can use it any number of times, and it's gonna be okay. I need to move the window because I don't. Okay. You see, in this case, I have a Node.js application that uses a lot of modules. So how we said that you use the npm tool to install the modules, but how do you deal with multiple people accessing the repository? How do you keep track that everyone uses the same version of the same packages? You just create a package JSON file describing the dependencies of your application and what version of those dependencies are to be used, and npm does the rest. So it makes sure that even if there is an upgrade, unless you set it to whatever application is out there, whatever version is out there, if there's an upgrade, it's not going to break the version requirement that you have here. So you can see I have a specific requirement for Express, but I'm okay with all these libraries, and this one, whatever is bigger than that version and whatever. And it makes dealing with packages and stuff real simple. It's even simpler than CakePHP plugins or stuff like that, where you have to do that math or something. Let me go back to the. I get confused when I have. What the fuck? Yeah, sure. Okay. Let me go to the slide we're at. Oh, fuck. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
LibreOffice is libre, which means free, but you know, there are some things, yeah, you get what you pay for. Okay, so yeah. So there, yeah, it's very simple. And when you work with Node, it's everything about the modules. So pretty much your entire application is going to be about knowing what module to use and for what. One of those modules that you're going to see floating around everywhere is Express. Obviously, since Node.js is a pretty new tool, the first thing that happened, all these frameworks started popping up, you know, because for some reason developers love frameworks and love writing frameworks and love reinventing the wheel over and over. So if you go to a Node.js module list, you're going to be a little bit thrown off because of the number of frameworks for building web applications for with Node.js that are out there. I'm going to save you a little bit of time and tell you just start with Express. Then you can move to other things. But if you start with Express, you're guaranteed to have the biggest community and pretty much one of the most simple ways of building your application. Express is, I've been said, and I'm not a Ruby user, but it's been said to be pretty much like Sinatra. So I don't know if you're a Ruby for some reason and you're a masochist and you like Ruby. Sorry, didn't mean that. So Express is pretty cool, and it's what we are going to be using on the second part of this talk to convert a portion of a CakePHP application. One of the things that, and this is for us CakePHP devs, this is like, so what? All the list of features that I'm gonna say is obviously available for any CakePHP user, but are cool to know that they're available on Express. Multiple environments is about defining, you know, your production, your development environment, your testing environment, and configuring certain parts of your application that can change depending on the environment that you're at. Middleware is actually a quite an interesting concept that you won't see in CakePHP or any, you know, lower than PHP 5.3 framework because, you know, you didn't have callbacks until PHP 5.3. Middleware is about having a function that you want being executed every time a request comes in, and letting the rest of the application or the rest of the list of functions that want to be executed for that request execute. So you can, you know, put your function in the middle, and every time that there is a request coming, I do something and I let, you know, the other middlewares take over. So imagine the possibilities that can give you, you know, to rewrite your to write your application. Routing, well, there's nothing to be said there. If you don't know what routing is, you probably shouldn't be here. Kidding. No, it's very simple and very down to earth. You just define a route, you know, and the function that should be executed when that route matches an incoming request. View rendering, if you don't have view rendering, you can do pretty much anything. There are different engines in Express that you can use for view rendering. Almost all of them have at least some partial support. Partial is sort of like CakePHP elements, you know, stuff that you can include and re-include on your views. You have session support, obviously, if you didn't. So the multiple environments thing is kind of very simple to define, you know, whatever you configure your system that when the dev environment is on or when you're in development mode, you know, do something. For example, in this case, I'm saying to Express, I need some sort of logging in my screen to know when an incoming request is being processed and stuff. On every one of my environments, I want to use this module and whatever. So it's very simple to define the stuff that you want. And in order to tell Node to tell Express to run a specific module, you just set a bash variable to whatever name you define for your environment, and you execute in the same line your Node application. And what I was saying before is it's very down to earth. reading the code, or it's very simple to read an Express code, because even if you don't know what Express is all about or what functions are there, you immediately know that what we are saying here is that whenever the slash or the index route is being requested, I want this operation to be executed. So most Express applications, you're going to see a bunch of these app get slash and a route definition there, and the function to be executed when that route matches. So that's pretty simple. And if you see, it doesn't look that different from the basic web server that we built before or that we've seen before with Node. It's pretty much the same concept and usage. Middleware, I said that middleware is about putting your functions in the middle of a request so you can do stuff and let the other middleware take over. And this is pretty much what it looks like. This is the same concept as before. Whenever I get request that matches this route happens, this is the function that I want to execute it. But before that, I want to execute this middleware. And this middleware, for example, takes the same parameters as a regular request, and you do something with it, and you tell, continue with the request. And in this case, I'm just using the route parameter to fetch the user from a list of users that I have somewhere. In this case, just a crappy array, but could be querying the database and setting that user as part of the request. So the moment that I'm inside this function and I know that it was preceded by this middleware, I know that I have direct that user available for me. And this is pretty cool because it helps you write your actions. It helps you keep your actions really slim and down to a point, where you don't see all this, fetching the user, making sure it exceeds or anything. You know that the moment that you reach this operation, the user is there. And how that happened, I don't know, I don't care. Some middleware took over that. So the more you work with Express, the more you're going to be writing middlewares and putting middlewares for your routing, for everything. So that. View rendering, again, is if I go back, obviously, obviously the simplest view rendering is just setting the HTML code here, sending the actual string. That's the simplest view rendering that you want. But if you want a little bit more and you use typical CakePHP view variables and replacements and stuff, you tend to have to use or choose a view engine. In this case, one of the engines that people use, I don't like it that much because it feels weird to me, but a lot of people like Jade. It's a very weird way to write HTML, but a lot of people in the Node world love it. So most applications tend to use Jade or EGS, which is another engine. And it's very simple to figure out. It's not that hard, actually. You just render a view, and you set the variable as part of the locals object. So whatever you set there is going to be available there. And you have certain expressions like each or, to use. EGS, another engine, allows pure JavaScript code on the view, which is, it can help you if you are more used to K views and other things. So you can put your oh, I lost the timer, so someone can shout when I'm 10 minutes close to finishing. That's gonna help because I lost the timer. So we have Express for a framework. We have the view stuff. So what about the database? This is like a soft promotion part. That's why it's all about me. NodeDB is a module that I decided to write to provide Node.js with connection to pretty much all sorts of relational databases. Why relational? Because all the document-oriented databases are already handled by different Node modules. So if you want to connect to Redis, Couch, Mongo, everything is solved for you, and you have a ton of modules to choose from. On the relational world, the story is a little bit different. For example, if you want to connect to MySQL, before my module, you had a couple of alternatives. That the most serious one is Felix. He's a known man in the Cake world. He hasn't been around in Cake for a while, but old timers know Felix. And he wrote a pure JavaScript implementation of the MySQL protocol. So actually, you could use his library to connect to a MySQL from an actual JavaScript code in the browser. I don't know why you would want to do that, but it's possible. but a lot of people use his library because it's been around for a time. And at the time, I wanted to get into the Node world without having to do the regular website stupid thingy, which is what I'm trying to solve here. The stupid thingy. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get involved by doing a little bit of more hard coding, like C++, getting involved in the inner circuit of Node. So I said to Felix, okay, what do you think about me writing a MySQL database driver in C++? He said, I mean, it's fine, but I already did it. And I said, yeah, but C++ is going to be faster. So it started like a challenge where he said, there's no way it's going to be faster. And I said, yeah, there's a lot of ways it's going to be faster in C++. So I wrote it. And then I realized that I could rewrite the code to make it a little bit more generic and use stuff for any database driver. So far I'm supporting MySQL, Drizzle, Oracle, and I'm finishing the MS SQL implementation and Postgres, which allows you to use the same API to communicate with any of these databases. In the future, I'm going to try to add more. And you know that it's pure C++ and uses the Node library, so it's non-blocking. So you know it's fast, and you know it's non-blocking. Supported databases, just cover that. And in order to query your database, I offer different ways of querying the database. There's a manual where you execute, like it would be a query in a CakePHP model. You just put the SQL query there. And there's an API, like, to make it a little bit easier to read, where you have a change methods that I'm going to show you just next. And it's important to know that one of the things that I offer is using buffer for large portions of text or binary and stuff, again, because of the reason of the heap that we mentioned, that we don't want to overload the heap. So this is a little bit how NodeDB looks like. It's always like any Node.js module is about putting functions, callbacks for when something is ready, and it's pretty simple. I'm not going to go through this. You can go to a website and go through it, but it's very readable in terms of the API. But you can see there I'm using the API method instead of the manual query method. And the thing that I guarantee is that the same API is used for all the database drivers, which sound simple, but it's not. Particularly if you use Oracle, where they suck for pretty much every operation. They do everything different. Like if you want to get the top 50 results, I challenge you to do that in Oracle. It's no fun. So yeah. Okay, so what's the idea behind what we said? We said that we're going to take a CakePHP application, the word we're not going to write the application here, and we're going to convert part of it to Node.js to, for some sort of improvement. The application that we're going to be building is a stupid thing. It's CakePHP 2.0 using authentication for messaging between users. And the idea here is that every time that a message comes in, I need to see, some sort of notification system, notification that, something is coming in. So that's going to be our main focus of work, the JSON part, where I get the latest messages. So you're going to realize that what we're going to be doing here is constantly requesting the JSON endpoint to figure out if we have new messages. There are several problems with our implementation. First, we're hitting the server even when we probably don't have information. So there are alternatives for that. One is called long polling. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You hit an endpoint request and you put a really high timeout and just wait for the server to have data. So the connection remains open, and the server, whenever they have data, they send back some data. The other alternative, which is my favorite, is WebSockets, which is a great tool, to use. If you just browse around the World Wide Web for WebSockets, and it's really interesting, where it's a very narrowed down HTTP protocol to have a server and a client, communicating back and forth. It's again one of Learn Boost, that company that I mentioned that develops a lot of Node.js modules. It's all their code. It's actually an Argentinian who wrote that, so cool. So why are we going to do this? Why are we going to change the JSON endpoint that we already have developed in CakePHP towards something built with Node? This is the reason why. This is a Node Scientific performance benchmark that I did on this application on one of my servers. This is CakePHP running on Nginx, so that's already a whole different story. If I run it on Apache, I probably would have seen like a third of that or less. So this is CakePHP on Nginx, and the JSON is very basic, no helpers, nothing. It's just a regular query with joins, not even model relationships, and spitting out the JSON. Not even a view, it's just spitting it out right on the controller. This is Node.js, a basic Node.js setup, Express, using Express, which already is increasing the number considerably. This is Node.js and pulling my database connections. That's something to consider, because if you're using PHP, you are used to that stuff being handled for you, like pulling connections or using persistent connections or whatever you want. In Node.js, you have to take care of that. So I'm using here a module for pulling the connections. And this is Node.js plus pulling collections plus using cluster, that little tool that I said that opens several node instances. So from here to there, you're at least doubling the speed. And this is on my machine, so I pretty much guarantee that if you're doing it on a server, you're gonna see even a higher increase. And that's the reason why I do that. Again, should I change my whole application because this is faster? No. If you think that you're gonna get an application built faster, given your CakePHP knowledge in Node than in Cake, you're fooling yourself. It's probably better that you use Cake for what it's good at, and you use Node to optimize parts of your application. So I'm gonna go quickly through this. The sample application has typical users and messages table. The only thing that I have to tell here is that make sure that whenever, and I say this on every talk that I have an opportunity, make sure that whenever you have a foreign key, add a key to the foreign key. Because whenever you join on a field and you don't have a key, you're gonna cry a little bit inside. So make sure you do. And this is what the JSON response looks like from CakePHP. So the idea is to produce the same exact response, which tells you that I'm actually going to lose time in Node to produce the same format, because this is a regular format for Cake, but it's not regular for whatever query system I use from Node. So I'm going to be losing a little bit of time to produce the same format of JSON. The CakePHP code is quite simple. Like I said, I have a controller, no hopper, nothing. I just query I have a little bit of an argument to tell, just query only messages that came since the last time that I checked, and fetching the messages through a regular find operation, which is going to be a join, not even related models, and spitting out the JSON right in the controller, using the CakePHP 2. This is CakePHP 2.0, by the way. It's not 1.3, sorry. So, spitting out the JSON encoded list of messages. This is the find. Nothing to see here, just a regular join and stuff. And this is what it's going to be starting to look like in Node.js, using Express, using the little framework that we mentioned. I define the route. I'm pretty much copying the same route format that we had on Cake to be able to switch from one operation, from one endpoint to another. So I define messages /incoming /some ID. I make sure that the ID parameter is there, that it follows a certain regular expression. I'm trying to make sure that I copy the same behavior that I have on Cake, and then I would use my database driver to query the operation and do something with the results. You see that I have here marked two areas. R is some sort of function that I'm using to output the contents. Looks like nothing, not a big deal. You're going to notice in Node that what is called an error first callback. This is it's not something that is mandatory, but if you don't do it in Node, you're going to be shot in the head or something. It's very important that you always follow this formatting where the first argument to a callback is always an error. So if it's null, it means everything is okay, you can continue. And if it's not, it means something happened. So every module that you use and has a callback is going to be following that. So make sure you take that into account and not assume that the first piece of information is your result. So in this case, I created my function to reply, following the same format. If there's an error, I just print error, and I'm dying. And the second part is actually outputting the content. This is, since we're doing Ajax operation, and since I'm going to be from the Cake application, which is on port 80, connecting through Ajax to another port in the same machine, I need to make sure that to put this line, otherwise it's not going to work on Chrome because of security constraints. So you need to make sure that you say, okay, I'm allowing AJAX requests. In this case, I just use a wildcard. I could have used a host name or something to say that. The NodeDB code is very simple. It looks pretty much the same as Cake, except for this part because because I need to mimic the same format that Cake has. So I'm creating those aliases in the uppercase version and so on and so forth. But it pretty much looks the same. It's just doing joins, where, order, etc., and executing the result. And this is where I do the result. And all this stuff is to follow the same format that Cake has. So if I was willing to change the client code, I could have gotten away with removing all this and not losing precious time. But I'm losing some time here just to produce the same result. So, and that's exactly the same. That produces exactly the same response as Cake did. So long polling, on the other hand, looks like we said, it's about from the client side performing an AJAX request and setting a timeout, a very high timeout, because right now, like we said, we're constantly polling the server and it makes no sense. So, yeah, okay, I have 23 minutes, right? Am I correct?
Already.
Okay, cool. Okay, bonus tracks, the fun part. Pulling connections. This is very important, and why I want to cover this, because this is very important, because if you're going to be doing something with Node.js, chances are that you're going to be querying a database or creating connections to something, or doing some sort of connection to an endpoint where you probably need to optimize the number of connections that you keep open. As you know, opening and closing a database connection takes a long time when you're dealing with multiple thousands of requests at the same time. So pulling is very important. And to pull, one of the libraries that I prefer is using NodePull, which is very simple to define. You just create a pool, you name your pool, you give it whatever name you want, so how many connections maximum you can have simultaneously, and what to do when a connection is needed to be created, and what to do when a connection is needed to be destroyed. So you can use this format to handle connections of any kind that you want. In this case, I'm using it for my database connection. So whenever you want to acquire a resource from the pool, you just say acquire, and again, error first callback. When a connection is ready, error is going to be null, and when it's not, error is going to have something, and it's going to suck.
Fahad's talk is starting for Kruger in the theatre. Please stay here if you're interested in this, but I'm just letting you guys know that one's starting out.
Oh, you're taking away my fans, man. That's not cool. I'm giving away free beers. That's why they're staying. So pulling, cool. Clustering. Clustering is, again, that little tool that opens different node processes on each CPU. So how does it look like? It's very simple. You just take your regular application and you separate it into two files. app, in this case, or whatever I want to name it, is going to be the same sort of code that I had before for my server. And when I say cluster app, it's cluster node, it requires that module, it imports it, and it opens one instance of that module for each process. So here I'm saying, okay, what to do when the pool of processes is going to be created, what to do whenever a worker is about to do something, and what to do, and which port to listen to. And the app module, which is that file that I told you, is pretty much the same. It looks almost exactly the same as our regular expert server. The only difference is that the server that we created with experts, we exported. Like we said, we export the same format that we use to export any module in Node.js. So when I run this, the first thing that I would see is that it opens 4 worker threads, because I have 4 processors in that machine. If I had 8, it would open 8, and if I wanted to change that number, it would be possible to change that number. The other thing is, this is what you were, he moved somewhere. This is what someone was asking me about, dealing with, all this set of change tasks that can get in the way of really beautiful code. So fortunately, everyone in Node.js agrees that that's something to be worked on. So there is a module to help us deal with a lot of these tasks and making sure, how to better optimize when I have simultaneous tasks or tasks that depend on the result of another task. So this module is called async, and it helps us control our tasks through a series of methods, forget about the collections, such a series that executes the set of tasks in order, and whenever a task fails, it executes a callback. Whenever a task is ready, it executes the callback. But if a task fails, it aborts the whole set of tasks. So if it aborts on the second task, it's not going to continue executing. Parallel is similar to series, but it doesn't stop on error. So it guarantees that it executes everything, and if something fails, it's fine. It just executes your callback telling you that it failed. Waterfall is very useful when you have, a query, using the results of that query, you do another query, and using the results of that query, you do another query. A point here to be made is that, and I've seen that as requests for my database modules, is that people are sometimes when they first enter Node.js are really reluctant of using this sort of callback mechanism, and they start asking about synchronous database, which my module allows. So they figure, okay, this looks a little bit simpler because I open the connection, I do the query below, and then I close the connection. What's the problem with that? Again, not blocking I/O. We need to make sure that instead of doing asynchronous, even if it looks better and it's simpler to write, it sucks from the Node.js perspective. So Waterfall helps us to figure out, like a what? No. Yeah, and what is it about? So, yeah, sounds similar to this. Yeah. No, I personally, that's cool. I personally use this one because I don't use it that much. I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable with having some functions. I mean, it's I have to hit the tab. So what? I mean, it's okay. It looks okay. Personally, I actually think it looks better than using Waterfall. But anyway, so this one is helping you deal with tasks that depend on other tasks. So it executes the first. This is an array, obviously, right? An array of functions. Each task is a function. So it executes the first task, and the result goes as a parameter to the second task. And the result of the second task goes as a parameter to the third task, and so on and so forth. So using the waterfall, you can do that, this query is only to be executed after this query finish, and after this query, so on and so forth. So, that helps you a little bit. Yeah, it is. I was going to say, you almost got me. It is, but yeah, it is. I decided to show you a little bit about the waterfall because from the three methods, kind of, the not so obvious one. So it's very simple. You see, this is the first task that I have. And in this case, I'm calling. Obviously, every task that you define has to have a callback, right? Because the callback is the way of this library of knowing what to do next. So you call the callback saying there's no error, first argument is always error, there's no error, and the result of this operation is 4. So the second one picks that up as the result and does something. Okay, there's no error, and the result of this operation is creating an object called ID and Jane Doe. And the third operation takes that object and prints it out. So you can see how simple that this is. With this, we can do something like fetching, the ID from the session, because the session, again, accessing the session has to be non-blocking, even something simple like that. Querying the database, and once I have results, outputting the. So, instead of seeing the functions indented, I get to see it in a more obvious way. I personally don't use it that much, but it's right there if you want to. Unit testing. Obviously, we have unit testing, and it's unit testing in JavaScript. So yeah, it sounds weird, but it is. But there is a module for that. I personally like Node Unit. There are other modules. That keeps being an issue with Node, that you have to figure out which module you like best. There are so many choices that it's up to you. Node Unit is pretty much wall test. To create a unit test, you just create a regular module, meaning a JavaScript file where you export stuff, your list of functions, and you have a set of methods to make the assertions and stuff. Using Node's assert module. That tells you that assert is part of the Node core. That's how important testing is in Node. That is part of the core, and the core is not that big. It doesn't have that many modules as part of the core. And you have the typical OK to make sure that something is a true value, equal, not equal, throws, does not throw. And one of the things that you may be wondering is how do I deal with testing non-synchronous or asynchronous tasks? And that's very important because in order for a node, you need to work like that to make sure that the number of callbacks that you expect to be executed are executed. You need to do a little bit of extra work and use these two functions that allow you to say, I'm expecting this number of assertions before executing them. Because without that, there's no way for you using callbacks, there's no way for you to figure out that if your test succeeded. Because you may have an assertion inside a callback, but if you don't have the expected number of assertions, the test is going to say that everything is okay, and maybe the callback didn't even get executed. So that's important. And this is what it looks like. Again, just exporting an object from my module using typical setup tier down. This is very common to almost any test suite available. And this is where you see the problem that I was saying. If I didn't have this, and I didn't execute this callback, I wouldn't have known that something is wrong. It would say, no unit would say, okay, everything is okay. But since I'm saying there has to be at least one assertion executed here, then something is going to be executed and it's going to be checking that to make sure. This is a regular way of creating a callback, a closure closure and then calling it right immediately. You have to use the parentheses because in that sense JavaScript sucks. I don't know why, but you have to. So a little bit of questions right now. I went ultra speed right in the last editor. So does anyone have any questions? Shoot. Doing JSON stuff that I need, like notification system. Whenever I want sort of the same. Oh, I didn't show the application. I should have. Sorry about that. For everything notification, Ajax stuff that I need really fast response times. We used to do uploading with that, but then we switched to the great service that is transloaded. If Kevin is here, he can thank me later. If you don't know about transloaded, you should find out, because it's really cool way of uploading your stuff. Okay, this is a regular Cake 2 application, authentication stuff. If you want the code, just ask me and I can give it to you. But there's nothing great to see there. So, and I'm going to log in now as another user. I love, using the porn mode for that. I'm sorry, incognito mode. Same. Yeah, but it's too bad that the incognito mode shares the session. So if you open another incognito, it's the same session. That's the only thing that sucks. Yeah, it does. It's surprising, but it does. Like if I would open now another session, let's try it. Original username. Let's see. You see, I'm already logged in. So the porn mode always shares the sessions. Yeah, it sucks. Okay, so the little tool here. You see it back there. That's using the CakePHP endpoint. Obviously now I'm going to switch to the Node endpoint, and you're not going to see a difference in performance when we're hitting it so mildly. So I'm going to change the endpoint. Oh, wrong. And there I have the second endpoint is I'm just going to overwrite the variable. The second endpoint is the Node.js, and I'm going to start it because I don't have it started. And I have all these different versions, as you can see, that I use for the benchmark. The regular Express, using pooling connections with Express, using cluster and pool connections. And I also build, like, instead of using Express, just a regular web server. So you can have that if you want to. Just going to start the common one. So it stays there and it waits for connections. And if everything works, and let me minimize this. Actually, I'm gonna move it down here. Didn't I move it? Oh, that's another one. And if everything works, obviously I have to refresh because I changed the JavaScript client code. Where is the browser? Damn it. Oh, there. And it keeps working, so that's the Node.js. Why was I showing this? For some reason, I don't remember. But yeah. Yeah? Because it's great. Because it works. Oh yeah, because you were asking what sort of, this notification mechanism is something that I will use it for processing, like if you have to encode videos or do stuff like that, you will use it for that. Pretty much anything that you want real fast speed. That's it. I mean, you don't, even if you want your application to be really fast, you don't necessarily have to have ultra super fast speed for everything. But there are certain things that you really want to concentrate in making sure that it works. A chat system would be another example, but I will use WebSockets for that because it makes everything so much easier. Let me show it. Actually, that's so cool that I will marry that. I will marry Socket.io. Have it. Yeah, I think. No, sockets. This, for example, this is an example of the socket code for the game application that I built for Node Knockout. It's very simple to follow. You have a socket listening somewhere in your application that can live alongside your Express instance. So you can be listening for regular web connections and for socket connections. And in the socket connections, you define stuff like every time someone connects to this socket, whenever they send me this message, you invent the message type, do something, and then emit something back to the client emits something to you, you broadcast to all your clients and stuff like that. So imagine the stuff that you can do with WebSockets. And the cool thing about WebSocket is that the Socket.io library pretty much runs on every browser because it has fallback mechanisms. Because WebSockets is a pretty recent specification technology, so not every browser fully supports it. Pretty much only Chrome and the latest Firefox and IE9, I think. I don't even know if IE supports WebSockets. So Socket.io has fallback mechanisms going back using Flash, weirdly enough. It doesn't require Flash, but if you have Flash, it uses Flash as a fallback mechanism, or in the bottom line of the chain using regular AJAX, constant AJAX requests between the server and the client. So getting to WebSockets, it can really help you do stuff, communication between client and server that has to happen really fast. So yeah, that's another thing that I use it for. Any other question? Great. So before we leave, oh wait, I will have to close that. No. Before we leave, I'm gonna have a request. Make sure that you vote for my game. I need your vote. Just as we are on this topic, just go there and show some love and stuff. Oh, I made good time. Oh crap. So if anyone wants the code, just tell me and